Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, the editor of Forbes Women, and today we are talking about news out of Arizona that affects women's health and women's ability to access health care. We are joined by Congressman Greg Stanton. He represents Arizona's 4th District. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
On Tuesday, the Arizona Supreme Court upheld a law from 1864 that bans nearly all abortions. I want to start with a very simple but perhaps complicated question. How exactly did this come to pass?
Well, it is a dark day in Arizona, a dark day that will hurt women across our state. Women, their lives will be at risk because of this legal decision, but not just the legal decision, the political decisions that led up to it. So what happened is that Arizona has had this law on the books since 1864 that is a near total ban on abortion, no exceptions for rape and incest. When Roe v. Wade was passed by the United States Supreme Court, when that was the decision of the United States Supreme Court, it put a stay on this 1864 law. Over the years, the Arizona legislature has put some restrictions on access to abortion services for women across Arizona, but they never, ever repealed the 1864 law. And in a very cynical move, just a couple years ago, the legislature passed a 15-week ban with no exceptions for rape or incest, but they specifically put in a provision that said the 1864 law is not preempted. It did so at the request of some very right-wing organizations that were hoping the Supreme Court would overturn Roe, and therefore the 1864 law would still be in place. Sadly and tragically, that's exactly how this played out. They never preempted the 1864 law. The Supreme Court did issue the Dobbs decision overruling Roe v. Wade, and therefore this 1864 law went into place. This was challenged by Planned Parenthood and others, saying that the 15-week ban should be the law in Arizona, but the Arizona Supreme Court just yesterday issued its ruling saying this territorial law that was passed even before Arizona became a state, at a time when women could not even vote, when Native Americans were not considered fully human under law in the state of the United States. A law from that time period is now the law of the land again in the state of Arizona, and that's why it's a dark day in our state.
How soon does this go into effect? Because there have been reports that the state attorney general has said that she will not enforce it. She is against this. There's, of course, the ballot measure that we can talk about in a little bit. But effectively, this news came this week. So do abortions stop immediately, or do folks have some time?
Okay, this is under legal dispute as well. Certainly, the Supreme Court gave, I think, a 15-day period for the plaintiff organizations to go back to the trial court and see if the trial court would stay the opinion for any reason. That's 15 days. There was an agreement earlier on in this litigation under a previous attorney general that would add an additional 45 days after any final decision before it would go into order. So most people think 60 days is the time period where this becomes actually in place in the state of Arizona. And yes, we do have a very important initiative on the ballot in Arizona that would restore the protections under Roe v. Wade in the Arizona Constitution. And I support that, and I think it's the right thing. I think now the voters of Arizona, to the extent there was any question, are going to overwhelmingly support this initiative to send a strong message that when it comes to civil and constitutional rights, including this right to abortion services, which has been in place for 50 years before the Dobbs decision, it was settled law in this country. First time in America, we've gone backwards on constitutional rights. We're going to restore that right and send a message that in our country, we go forwards on civil and constitutional rights, not backwards.
We had received an update just the other week from folks out of Arizona about that ballot initiative. Is that officially on the ballot, or are you waiting for the final few thousand signatures needed to get that officially on the ballot?
Well, I'm so proud of all of the volunteers who have done amazing work. The initiative campaign recently announced that they passed the 500,000 signature threshold, an amazing accomplishment, but they still got more time. And so they are out collecting even more signatures. I forget what the exact number of valid signatures was, 300 and some odd thousand, certainly the highest number ever in Arizona history needed to get initiative on the ballot because it is a constitutional amendment. But as I sit here right now, I have a high level of confidence that they will get the sufficient number of signatures, including the additional buffer necessary in case there's a challenge, that they will get those signatures and there will be an initiative on this ballot and people can run to that ballot box and vote in favor of restoring constitutional rights, including the right to abortion services.
So effectively 60-ish days from now, a near total ban will take place, but in November you're confident for a vote. Let's fast forward those 60 days. What can women and people of Arizona expect the reproductive health landscape to look like in Arizona?
Well, yesterday, after I found out about this horrific decision by the Arizona Supreme Court, I spoke to providers, and they told me, number one, their patients are terrified of this decision, what it means for their lives, their families' lives. The provider told me that certainly, some patients that need abortion services will be able to travel to California. Some will have the financial means to do so, but many, many women will not have that capability, and this will have a devastating impact. And certainly, it will have an impact on women's health that need these services for their own health and safety. This will put women's lives at risk as a result of this decision. It's a decision that simply cannot stand. It won't stand. Not just women, but all Arizonans are going to, I believe, overwhelmingly send a strong message in saying this decision, this cynical policymaking by anti-choice folks, mostly Republicans, but mostly Republicans, these cynical decisions that led to this, they could have taken care of this. People are smart, you're not going to pull a fast one on them. They know exactly who's responsible for this. And I think the overwhelming vote is going to go in the other direction in support of restoring these rights.
When you say they know who exactly is responsible for this, who do you hold responsible for this decision?
Well, it really is the Arizona legislature and the former governor who passed a very cynical law in just a couple of years ago, in which they tried to suggest that they were in favor of a 15-week ban as a law in Arizona, but did not repeal the 1864 law. If they were serious, if they had the courage of their convictions, they would have repealed this 1864 law, so this wouldn't even be an issue in Arizona. But they wanted to send a message to the extreme right wing that wink, wink, we're with you still. We're going to try to have it both ways. And so this is I don't think they really thought that the Arizona Supreme Court would do this. And I've seen my anti-choice friends who were cheering the Dobbs decision, have supported life at conception bills, now twisting themselves like a pretzel, trying to explain why they think this Arizona Supreme Court ruling was the wrong decision. You can't square that circle. It's impossible. And they should have made it clear, if they were going to be on the support of abortion rights, they should have made that clear previously, and they didn't. And so people are smart. They know exactly what's going on. They try to have it both ways. You can't really do that in politics.
Now, obviously, you represent the 4th District in Arizona, but let's just look nationally. If someone from New York or Pennsylvania or Virginia is watching this interview, why should they care about something happening in Arizona? Because they could very easily say, well, that's Arizona. I don't live there. It doesn't affect me.
Okay, well, if you want to live naively and think that it won't affect you eventually, this entire movement, Life Begins at Conception, the anti-IVF movement, which is real in the United States of America, the desire of these right-wing groups to try to get a national abortion ban passed, a right-wing Supreme Court. I guess even the former President Trump tried to disavow this decision. Well, this decision is a result of the Dobbs decision, which is exactly what he promised he would do as president, is put right-wing judges on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe. There's a direct line between that Supreme Court decision and what happened in Arizona. And if you don't think they're going to come after mifepristone or contraception, you're fooling yourself. If you don't think they're going to try to, at the national level, based upon the strong push by these right-wing groups, go after things that people in the blue states rely on, that families rely on. Who would have thought that even IVF services would somehow become illegal in a state in this country? So no one should get comfortable no matter what state you live in. We need to speak loudly in this upcoming election. Obviously, I support President Biden, who has been a strong supporter, strong, consistent supporter of abortion rights in this country. That's what I think the voters are going to support in light of this horrific decision, is not Johnny-come-latelys who are trying to take a safe political position at the last minute. Those who they know have been strong and consistent supporters of abortion rights here in the United States of America. That's who's going to do well in this upcoming election.
You've been outspoken against this decision, even speaking on the House floor the other night, and you came out and you said, I am angry about this. Why was it important for you to make that statement on the House floor, and has anything come of it? Any reactions, any phone calls you've gotten in response to your statement on the House floor?
Well, I said I was angry on the House floor because that's the nicest thing I could have said. I heard from a lot of people in Arizona. They are PO'd. They cannot believe this is happening in our state, and they are angry that political leaders have allowed this to even get to this point. And I think that the initiative that we talked about earlier, it was going to pass already, but now it's going to be supercharged, if you will. You're going to see a surge of support for the initiative and for elected officials that have been strong and consistent supporters of abortion rights. An intensity that we haven't seen before. And intensity matters in elections because that affects voter turnout, the voter turnout numbers, which there were a lot of stories about those of us who feel the way I feel about abortion rights and the right to an abortion, and the fact that it was ripped away by the Supreme Court, that there was going to be concern about passion in this election. Well, not anymore. The people who support restoration of constitutional rights, they are fired up and they are angry. And I was trying to express that anger on behalf of the people of Arizona on the floor of the United States House of Representatives.
So a lot coming up, a ballot initiative, obviously a November election. Anything else? What's next for this issue and for you?
Well, a lot of things. Number one, the initiative in Arizona is very important, and it should pass, and we should put these protections into the Arizona Constitution. But make no mistake, there is no substitute for doing this at the federal level, because civil and constitutional rights should not be a state-by-state thing where you have certain constitutional rights in one state, but they can be taken away in another. That's not how it works. We're Americans. If you have a constitutional right, you have that right in every single state. So we need to pass the Women's Health Protection Act at the federal level. And if any senator thinks that protecting the filibuster is more important than protecting constitutional rights, just look at the anger in Arizona right now. I might suggest that your priority should be protecting constitutional rights and not a Senate rule, an archaic rule from many years ago. And you should allow for the political process to take its course and have the House, the Senate, and President Biden sign the Women's Health Protection Act so that we can restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land in Arizona, where I think most people thought that that was the right balancing on this most important issue and protecting this constitutional right.
Representative Greg Stanton, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the good conversation.